You're watching the legal breakdown. So, Glenn, Donald Trump was just hit with a staggering $83 million in damages that he has to pay to E. Jean Carroll. Now, first of all, he's already said that he'll appeal. What happens with the money in the event of an appeal? Does Donald Trump have to pay it immediately, or does that get put on hold until the appeals process is done?
Yeah, great question. Ordinarily, somebody can put up what's called an appeal bond so that, the losing party, Donald Trump in this case, doesn't have to start paying out on that $83 million money damages judgment that the New York jury just awarded to E. Jean Carroll. But here is the really challenging part for Donald Trump. Ordinarily, when you put up an appeal bond, because the overwhelming majority of cases on appeal get affirmed. In other words, ultimately, at the end of the day, when the appeal has concluded, the losing party generally has to pay. Because of that, if somebody is going to guarantee it, if somebody's going to put up a bond for Donald Trump, he would have to pledge 100% of the value of the money judgment in some kind of unencumbered property. I know that sounds like a mouthful, but basically, he's going to have to put up $83 million worth of assets that don't have any liens, that don't have any loans, that he doesn't owe a mortgage on, for example, in order to guarantee that if at the end of the appeal he loses, that the person who put up the bond for him is not going to be out millions and millions and millions of dollars. So I think the challenge for Donald Trump will be, who in the world can he go to that will put up this bond for him if he can't take $83 million worth of his stuff and basically put it in trust to guarantee that the bondsman will not lose his or her shirt? It's a little bit of a complex issue. There are lots of moving pieces, but as of right now, I don't know if Donald Trump is going to be able to stop or pause having to begin paying out on this money judgment. That's something we're going to learn more about in the days and weeks to come.
Glenn, just a quick question, kind of in the weeds a little bit here, but why does he have to put up a bond backed by assets, and why not just backed by money, like a money bond?
Yeah, so you can put up a money bond. And ordinarily, when you put up a money bond, you're generally required to put up like 10% to kind of, guarantee that, you're not going to flee, you're going to make good on the payment when the time comes. But the problem is, if you go to the American Bar Association's discussion of appeals bonds, because the overwhelming majority of the appeals are affirmed. In other words, Donald Trump at some point will have to pay out. Chances are he'll have to pay out the whole $83.3 million. He could certainly take $83.3 million and put it in trust to guarantee that there will be a sufficient pot of money to pay out at the end of the day. I don't think there is a bondsman or an institution or an insurance company in the world, though, that will let him put up just 10%. For example, I mean, Donald Trump is notorious for not paying his debts. So that's why you either, I would suspect, have to put up collateral like real estate, real property to secure that bond, or if you want to find $83 million and put it in trust so that there is enough of a pot to satisfy that money judgment at the end of the day, then I'm sure somebody would be willing to put up the bond. But do you really think Donald Trump has $83 million in loose change that he can hold in trust to satisfy the judgment? Now, we know what he's going to do, Brian. He's going to turn
Of
to his
course.
supporters and say, look, this was a witch hunt. This is unfair. This is the deep state going against me. This is a horribly biased judge. So here's what I need y'all to do. I need you to send me money that tallies up to $83.3 million. I have to believe that even his base, even his supporters are not going to be willing or able to donate $83.3 million to Donald Trump.
Yeah, nothing quite like a self-proclaimed billionaire begging for scraps from his base, all the while calling himself a populist. I mean, it just you couldn't write it any better than that. Glenn, what is the appeals process now, and how long could this take from beginning to end? And the end, I'm assuming, would be Trump's inevitable appeal or effort to appeal this thing up to the U.S. Supreme Court.
Yeah, the good news leaping forward to the Supreme Court question. I don't think there's a chance on earth that the Supreme Court is going to accept review of a civil suit, defamation suit where, money damages have been awarded. There's just no constitutional issue involved there. But he will appeal, and he'll appeal to the Federal Circuit Court of Appeals because this was a federal case in New York. The good news is the federal appeals courts are pretty good, pretty diligent about working through their appeals in a timely manner. I think the state courts maybe move a little slower, primarily because they are understaffed and under-resourced, and they have so many appeals that they have to contend with. But I suspect you're going to see this thing move through the appellate process. However, you're probably not going to see a final ruling out of the Federal Circuit Court of Appeals for, I'm going to say, 6 months to a year.
Okay. Now, does this devastating result, and it was devastating. I mean, this went from $5 million in the first trial to $83 million in the second trial. If the guy does it again, God knows how much money he's going to be out. But does this devastating result for Trump's lawyer, Alina Habba, have any impact on her reputation as an attorney? Or was that reputation already in the toilet the moment that she decided to make herself a Trump mouthpiece?
Yeah, not to be snarky, but the question is what reputation? I mean, we saw
Right.
Judge Kaplan, ride her something fierce because she didn't know how to conduct herself in court. She didn't know the rules of evidence. She didn't know how to get a document admitted so that it could go to the jury. She violated the judge's restrictions over and over and over again. She really is a PR flack. She doesn't behave like a lawyer. She doesn't perform like a lawyer. But will she still be sought after in MAGA world? Will others perhaps want to hire her to do for them what she did for Donald Trump? Well, what she did for Donald Trump was lose him over $80 million when E. Jean Carroll was seeking $10 million. So I think you hire Elena Habba at your own peril.
Let's finish off with this. Glenn, Donald Trump obviously already lashed out at the judge in this case and also at Joe Biden, somehow claiming that Joe Biden was responsible for a jury awarding E. Jean Carroll $83 million. But that's neither here nor there. Conspicuously absent in his screed was any attack against E. Jean Carroll. Do you think he's learned his lesson now?
Do you think Donald Trump is capable of learning from his mistakes? I doubt it, but I noticed the same thing that you did, Brian. He kept his big trap shut about E. Jean Carroll when he started posting about the jury verdict. But I have a couple of thoughts about that. First of all, he continued to defame, indeed savage, E. Jean Carroll during the course of this trial. Guess what? All of that could serve as the basis for yet a third defamation suit, because it is only the defamatory statements he made up until the time she filed this suit that were included in the suit proper. Now, some of the other defamatory statements that Donald Trump was making during the course of the trial did come into evidence, but they came into evidence as what's called 404B. Other misconduct that kind of reinforces what Donald Trump has been doing. Do I suspect that E. Jean Carroll wants to go through a third round of defamation trial with Donald Trump after she's won almost $90 million in combined money damages when you take the two awards from the two trials together? I can't imagine she does, but you know what? If she does, she'll probably win a third judgment against Donald Trump.
And it remains to be seen, because last time it took Donald Trump all of 24 hours before he defamed her again. That would ultimately serve as the basis for this second defamation lawsuit. So, jury's still out, so to speak, in terms of what Donald Trump will do from here. But so we'll obviously stay on top of any appeals that happen in this case. With that said, for those of you who want to stay on top of this case, please make sure to subscribe. The links to both of our channels are right here on this screen. I'm Brian Tyler Cohen.
And I'm Glenn Kirshner.
You're watching The Legal Breakdown.